Good afternoon. My name is Emily from the Membership Puzzle Project. It's so nice to see so many wonderful, good-looking faces here in Perugia. This is basically paradise. What I would like to do is to set up a little bit about Membership Puzzle Project and some of our research findings that I think will be beneficial to those of you in the room. Then I will introduce my esteemed panelists who are part of our research affiliate program. And then we're just going to open up for a discussion amongst the panel and then leave time for your questions. Does that sound good? Great. So, Membership Puzzle Project is an initiative out of New York University Journalism School to understand how news sites might be better optimized for trust. So one of our hypotheses, in collaboration with our funders, Knight Foundation and the Democracy Fund, is that membership in its most robust forms is a great way to create sustainability for news, both in terms of long-term engagement and a sense of belonging, and also revenue. So we really think about audience development and engagement and audience revenue as two sides of the same coin, that you can't have one without the other. I want to make a quick distinction about some of what we'll be talking about as a group here today, in that our project differentiates between subscription, donation, and membership. And a fair amount of this information is on our site. We are a project in the public interest, and so would encourage you to share the questions that you have for us. But just a little bit of table setting is that we think of subscription as a product-based transaction. I give the New Yorker $100 US or so a year. They give me digital access and a copy of their magazine in my mailbox each week. The exchange starts and ends there. And that is a wonderful way of doing business for many, many news organizations. Where our project is really fascinated is around membership that looks more like a cause-based exchange, where you participate in something because you believe in it, and you're part of a social contract. So our research is heavily focused around what is given and received on both sides, with a particular attention to ways that people can pay in participation. So the idea that, yes, monetary giving is absolutely essential, but there are lots of other ways that your readers, listeners, and viewers might help the work that you do by participating in the journalism, whether that be as technical proofreaders, as comment moderators, as event volunteers, event programmers, as fact checkers, and many, many more ways of engaging in really robust knowledge exchange in two directions. And the two directions piece is really crucial, and this is what you'll hear from the panelists today, that this isn't just journalism in which the audience is engaged to interact at the point of publication and then asked to distribute the work. Many of these sites are really thinking about how can we engage the audiences we want to reach from the very beginning of our publication processes to create work that really is much more involving and reflective of the communities that they aim to serve. As part of this work, our project has gone around the world, and these are some of the supporters of the sites of the esteemed people you see here, and we've asked the question of them, what are the things that you value in the independent news that you choose to support with your time, energy, money, and ideas? And we've heard really high consistency in the things that people say that they value. So we'll go clockwise here. And this really comes out of questions about, for news and the organizations you support beyond it, what really drives your decision to give and to be part of an organization, to affiliate yourself with it, and to be involved in substantive ways? The first thing that we hear is the importance of transparency. Pull back the curtain and demystify your work. Make it clear to your supporters where their money goes, how you make hiring decisions, how you make editorial decisions. We find that so much of this really is sort of a black box, even for professional people who are longtime supporters of news. Next, we hear a lot about the importance of a sense of uniqueness, and this is something that all of these sites do fantastically well, to offer coverage that their audience members can't find anywhere else, whether it's because their reporters have deep expertise in those subject areas, because other area publications have backed off from that coverage, or many, many more reasons. We hear a lot about the importance of a user experience that doesn't take advantage of people's attention. So a site or a mobile app where they can come and really get immersed in the news, understand complex topics, and not be bombarded with slow-to-load pages, pop-up ads, and other disruptive experiences. We also hear a lot about the importance of a financial ask that literally makes sense. And I wish I could tell you what that amount should be or what the right thing to ask for on a monthly or annual basis is for the sites that you work for. But I would say that going directly to your supporters to ask these questions will go much further. So really developing a fascination with their price considerations, the way that they use your news products, and their points of dissatisfaction with mainstream news will really help you identify pricing strategies moving forward. And then finally, offering the world something that I think should exist. We hear this over and over again, the idea that even if an individual supporter of news doesn't visit your site 3 times a day, they still believe that it's a civic good and something that they want to see exist in the world. We hear a lot about this, the educational and the information role that journalists play in our societies, and I just want to echo that back to you because that is so fantastically important to hear, that the work that you're doing really does matter day in and day out to the people you're trying to reach. Similarly, we hear a great deal about the things that people get less value out of than I certainly expected in undertaking this work. So the first thing that we hear is branded merchandise as a benefit is something that they care about not a lot, if at all. 9 times out of 10, supporters of independent news will tell us they would rather have the money go back into the journalism as opposed to getting a tote bag or a sweatshirt with your site's name on it. And then very encouragingly, we also hear that supporters of independent news around the world really want access to the core news products they support to remain free. So that means, where possible, removing or not implementing paywalls in the first place so that more people can access the work. This is not to say that members-only benefits like members' newsletters or early access to events and the like aren't additive. Those play an important role in sort of moving the needle, especially for people who are first-time supporters. But the importance of creating an inclusive experience rather than an exclusive one is one that we hear over and over again. So with some of that background, about 4 months ago, we launched a research affiliate program with audience-facing staff at sites around the world who told us they could benefit from a professional community around membership and news. And this absolutely comes out of studying what works with other networks, such as the News Revenue Hub and the Institute for Nonprofit News in the US. We wanted to create a community of publishers who are open-minded but distinct in their coverage and also at different points in their audience engagement and membership programs. And so, without further ado, I'll introduce 4 of the 5. There's one other site, which is the US education site Chalkbeat, which is also a part of this cohort. Directly to my left, I have Natalie Choate, Director of Media Relations and Partnerships for the Texas Tribune. The Tribune is a member-supported, nonpartisan newsroom headquartered in Austin, Texas, focusing on informing Texans about public policy, politics, and government news. And some of the work that we'll be talking about today comes from Rebecca Quarles, formerly of the Tribune and now with the News Revenue Hub. Next, we have Jessica Best, operations lead for the Correspondent. And the Correspondent comes out of Day Correspondent, a member-funded Dutch news site that focuses on context and insightful context rather than the daily news cycle, and that's something that we're going to talk about in our time here today. The Correspondent, the English language site, is forthcoming, and Micah Goslinga, who unfortunately can't be here, also contributed to the work that you'll hear. Next, we have Andrea Hart, Director of Community Engagement for City Bureau, which is a civic journalism lab based on the south side of Chicago, focusing on equitable local media coverage and civic participation. And finally, Damien Osta, co-founder and CEO of La Diaria, an independent newspaper headquartered in Montevideo, Uruguay, organized as a workers' cooperative and focused on civic and organizational transparency. Each of these sites has a different model. As you heard, La Diaria is a co-op. Other sites in this cohort are for-profit or nonprofit. And so the first question that I wanted to bring to the panel today is, why membership? Because this isn't just something that is a revenue strategy. For many of them, it can be a very effective part of how they fundraise, but it goes well beyond that. And so actually, I'm gonna kick it off to Andrea to talk about why do you embark on this in the first place?
Totally. Yeah, so it's as much a financial decision as it is a political one. So the city of Chicago is incredibly diverse, but also incredibly segregated. And I think it's funny that City Bureau hosted its first fundraiser the day that DNA Info shut down. And so DNA Info was a hyperlocal news site catered to neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago, but it was funded by the Ricketts, Joe Ricketts, I forget which one, but a wealthy family, so single founder, single funder, and that to us was like very problematic. And we actively have talked about how do we diversify our newsroom, and the flip side of that same coin is like, how do you diversify your funding strategy? Because we are accountable to, we are very much unapologetically localized and hyper-local and place-based. And so in doing that, part of that means like we are accountable to our local folks, but also that we provide a value that they pay for. And so we want our funder base to look like our newsroom, to look like our workshops, to look like all of the programming that we do, because that means that we have reached the right amount of people who now invest in what we're doing. And so it's very much, so when we think about membership, it's a political act as much as it is like a long-term sustainable financial plan.
Yeah, for the Correspondents, it came out of the way we were founded. Our founder, Rob Weinberg, founded The Correspondent when he was fired from one of the major Dutch newspapers, NRC Next, because he essentially believed that news or the news cycle is uninteresting. What's really interesting is structures and the forces that shape our world, and that's the sort of journalism we should be doing. But what he found was that sort of legacy publishers or traditional publishers weren't that interested in supporting this kind of work because actually they're supported by advertising, and advertising doesn't support that kind of work because you're chasing clicks, you're chasing numbers. So this belief that kind of the news or the breaking news isn't interesting and that we wanted to be ad-free meant that membership really made sense for The Correspondent. And the other thing that we really feel is that membership goes right to the center of the trust relationship. It really, we feel it helps us to address the trust crisis in that our members are invested in what we do. We listen really closely to what they want and what they need from us. And we're able to do that because we're sustained by them. And that really helps to build a relationship. We're not trying to sell them to anyone else.
I think for the Texas Tribune, membership has always been part of what we do. It was baked into the cake when we first got started. It was a very important aspect of our mission. We believe that engaging and educating Texans will make for a better Texas. And so membership has been the core of that. We also prioritize members because we know that they're ambassadors for the work that we do, and that they lay their name on the line when they talk about our work, and so it makes sense that we would invest in them. There's also a community aspect to membership. We know that they value our work and that we want to foster that community. So in addition to being a revenue opportunity, they're really a lot more than that for us.
I'll also quickly mention one of the things that we heard when we were interviewing supporters of the Texas Tribune was this idea of you don't try to be all things to all people. You focus on policy and on Texas, and that sort of purview that is very focused really stands out from news that is part of the 24/7 news cycle that can feel distracted and distractible. Damien.
Buenas tardes. Primero presentar a Irene Benedicto, que va a ser mi intérprete.
Hi, first of all, I would like to introduce my interpreter, Irene Benedicto, that is my name. I'll be translating Damian since he is a Spanish speaker, and so I am.
Bueno, nosotros concebimos la membresía como la única forma de que exista periodismo independiente.
We conceive our membership really as the only way for independent journalism to exist.
En un contexto de alta concentración de los medios de comunicación y de caída de la rentabilidad de las empresas periodísticas, la única forma de que siga existiendo periodismo independiente es una alianza entre lectores críticos y periodistas profesionales.
In a context of high competence among different media outlets, we think that the only way to maintain rentability from media outlets is really an alliance between critical audience and engaged, compromised journalists.
Con esta filosofía fue que surgió La Diaria hace 12 años en un país muy chiquito, pero que está demostrando que es posible construir medios que no pertenezcan a las grandes corporaciones si nos unimos lectores y periodistas.
With this philosophy, it was that La Diaria was born in Uruguay 12 years ago. Uruguay is a tiny country, and it was really challenging to build a new media outlet out of this big corporation that keep all the control of the news publication industry. This is, as I said, thanks to this alliance between the public from the beginning, creating this community.
Thank you.
Gracias. In the work that I mentioned, where we interview supporters of independent news to find out not only about why they choose to support these and other publications, and also why they're frustrated with a lot of the news that we see, some of the themes that come up over and over again are that they want to see projects that are more inclusive and participatory, more human, humble, and very importantly, more unique in the coverage that they offer. And so I'd especially like to ask Natalie and Jess to talk about how do you push back when you're really trying to get your newsrooms to focus on substantive long-term stories, not just chasing what has happened in the past 12 hours.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So you may have heard recently in Austin, we had the Austin bomber. It was a serial bomber that terrorized our community and was very unique. It's very uncommon to have a situation like that in the Austin community. And it was a pool for all the newsrooms in our area to provide coverage on the Austin bomber. It's all everyone could talk about. And we have a credo at the Texas Tribune that really outlines what constitutes coverage from us and what does not. And in the editorial process and trying to figure out what to cover in relation to the Austin bomber, I pulled out that credo and said, how does this align with what we promised we would provide to our audiences and what we would not? And our teams did a fantastic job of sourcing information that was critical to the community, and it was widely shared and was depended on by our audiences. But we definitely felt the pull, and I think the 24-hour news cycle contributes to that as well. But we were grateful to lift up our peers who could really be the authoritative source on that breaking news, on another breaking news that is outside of the Texas Tribune's mission.
For the Correspondents, our slogan in English is your antidote to the daily news grind. So this has been built into our DNA from the start, that we just don't cover breaking news. But that doesn't mean we don't feel the pull in the same way. one of the examples I think that highlights this really well, where we can address the fact there is a major event of major importance to our members, but that we are not the right people to address that at this point, was the bombing of the Brussels airport a couple of years back. This was a huge news story for the Netherlands as well as for Belgium. It was something of great importance to our members, and we wanted to acknowledge that this was something happening in their lives, but we weren't the right people to cover that at that time. We had nothing to add within 6 hours, not even within 12 hours, 24, perhaps even a week. We had nothing that was going to help us understand the structural reasons for this story. But we didn't want to ignore it. So our founder sent an email out to our members which said, we know this has happened, we acknowledge this has happened, but we have nothing new to add to the debate right now. We will report on this when we have something to add. And then we did a similar thing where we pointed to the news sources that were covering this in a breaking manner that we trusted and that we respected. So we sort of raised up the work of our peers, as you say, Natalie. And we did return to it a few months down the line with different coverage about how the media covers terror attacks, things like that. But at that time, we had nothing to add, and that was fine, and we left it alone.
That to me suggests a great deal of humility to be able to say, not only do we not have anything to add to this story at this moment, but here are the other sites that we trust for the type of coverage that you're looking for. I think that idea of humility is, again, something that we hear time and time again, that humble news organizations are those that correct themselves when they're wrong, that ask for help when they need it, and that recognize they don't have all of the answers all of the time. And I think that example really bears that out. Another consideration here that I think is well worth mentioning is the importance of place and the large role that geography plays, whether you're a local site or not. And I'd like to actually ask Damien and Andrea to talk a little bit about the importance of connecting with a local or even a hyper-local membership base that may involve the people that your staff sees day in and day out in Uruguay and in Chicago.
Sí, en primer lugar, es un debate súper interesante. Yo creo que no debemos renunciar a la disputa de la agenda central.
First of all, I would like to say that it's a very interesting debate, and we are not giving up on covering the media, the agenda setting, let's say.
Lo que sí deberíamos es abordarla desde otro lugar, la agenda central, sin correr atrás del último momento.
What we're trying to do is approaching these same topics from a different perspective, without this urgency, with a more reflective point of view.
Y para eso es fundamental asumir que no solo somos generadores de información, sino que somos dinamizadores de una comunidad de conocimiento.
And with that assumption that we are not only generating information, but really dynamizing a community of knowledge.
Porque la base social que puede sostener un nuevo tipo de periodismo es el de un público sumamente informado, sumamente formado y comprometido.
These new journalists weren't trying to do target highly educated people that are intellectually curious. So we're really writing to people that know a lot about what's happening.
Y el desafío es saber utilizar el conocimiento que nuestros supporters, que nuestros suscriptores o miembros tienen en el momento adecuado para hacer un mejor periodismo.
And so our challenge is really to use our subscribers' knowledge to produce information or to produce journalism in the very moment they need it.
Thank you.
So City Bureau is a local organization with national impact. That's how we frame it. We're unapologetically place-based. In the through the last year, we did a study out of UT Austin, the Center for Media Engagement, where we tried to assess the feelings of Chicagoans about media, and it basically affirmed a lot of our assumptions and a lot of what folks have been saying, where the south and west sides of the city of Chicago often have little interaction with journalists, and it's usually negative when they are covered, but that if asked, they would be willing to contribute and participate in the media making process. And that is literally what we do. And so we focus on the South, because we're place-based, we are consistently accessible to folks. And that's why it really matters to us that we have noticed that in Chicago, neighborhoods get covered differently, often with a deficit lens. So when a murder happens, when a shooting happens, when a school closes, it's not complete and comprehensive and humanistic. And so to counter that, we do consistent engagement. We have a weekly open workshop series every Thursday night where folks can come to our newsroom and talk to our journalists or other folks within our community, because consistency matters. We knew that folks that we work with and want to cover, they want to know people. They want to know that you're going to show up when it's not just because of some bloody thing that's happening. And so that's why place-based really matters, because it's a way to hold us accountable and to be really transparent and honest and to make sure that our storytelling and the information gathering that we do is accurate. But then, with this study, we got affirmed that not only does that matter in those ways, in reimagining what it looks like to cover these areas, but it also helps you reevaluate how to engage your audience in a way that allows them to contribute to the process in a way that is still incredibly ethical. Most people don't want to be pandered to. They don't want to be told what they just want to hear, but they do want to be respected. And that's why, to us, place-based really matters.
Can you and others talk about the methods of that participation and how you actually do this? Because participation and engagement can feel, frankly, like buzzwords. And so I'd love to talk about the actual practices and the routines that you build into the work so that your journalists, and in your case, your young people who are documenters, are in active, regular conversation with community members.
So City Bureau has been around for 3 years in theory, 2.5 years in practice, and we run 3 things. We run a fellowship 3 times a year, which Bettina Chang is in the audience. She's our editorial director and another co-founder, and it's a brilliant program because of her. And so that program, it has reporters emerging and experienced working 10 weeks, 3 times a year, covering issues in the communities. But they pull from this. So we have documenters where anybody from the age ranges from 16 to 80. It's 75% of the geographic area in the city of Chicago, where we pay and train folks to document public meetings, most simply. And those meetings that they attend, oftentimes that living archive of information that they're generating, our fellows then use in their reporting. Or we've even hosted, so I mentioned the weekly public workshop series that we have. Some documenters have even hosted public workshops around some of the information that they've gathered. So for us, everything is in communication with each other, because we want various folks who represent various parts of Chicago to feel engaged and invested in the work that we're doing, and that we will listen to them authentically. I think the problem with a lot of engagement projects, and using that word as a buzz, is that it's project-based. It's not naturally baked into the work that you do wholeheartedly. But to us, from jump, it's there.
It's kind of hard to overstate the importance of that.
Yeah, I think we would wholeheartedly agree with that it's a question not if we should engage with readers around this particular story, it's just a question of how. So for everything we do, that's baked in. Also, engagement as a buzzword is something that we kind of very much agree with as well, and that for us it has to be about far more than talking back. And also that member engagement means different things for different members. It can't just be this blanket term. In terms of how we do it, baking it into the DNA has always been important for us. So if anybody came to the Correspondent group therapy session this morning, it was very cathartic. You would have heard me talk about the fact that our correspondents, 50% of their time is dedicated to member engagement. So we expect them to spend half of their time speaking with members. That might be through our contributions section. That might be directly through events in our newsroom, or that might be in any other number of ways, so providing different avenues for participation. And that's super important to us as well. So for engagement for some will mean one email over the course of a year, and they might feel just as engaged as people who are actually coming into the office to clean up data sets for us, or going out into their community to interview people for us to report alongside. So it looks different for every member, and we try to support that in as many ways as we can.
Y'all, Texas is big. Newsflash. It's really big, and we have a challenge engaging and activating our audiences statewide. We got Austin licked. When you look at the other metros in Texas, we're doing pretty well there too. We know from demographic research that there's huge growth in the suburban areas, and so that's really where we're looking to establish stronger and bigger communities. But when we think about engagement at the Texas Tribune, to us, membership is the highest form of engagement. And that's a shift for us. Before we were thinking strictly about numbers, and that's been a change, going from using unique visitors to membership as a form of success. And it varies per target. It totally depends on how you talk to them and the medium and mode in which they prefer to use. But geographically speaking, it's a challenge for us. We have 60 plus free events statewide, and we know that our members aren't really going to those. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to engage those members through our public events.
In talking to Day Correspondent and Texas Tribune supporters especially, but this is the case for many, many sites, the importance of word of mouth, not only for discovering the site at first, but for making the decision to join and to become an active member is something that's really important. And I wonder, Natalie, if you could just talk briefly about some creative ways that you've encouraged members to even put their own name on the line when it comes to sort of showing to others that they back your work.
Yeah, sure. So we like to think about the ask, the big ask, in a few different ways. I think there's obviously a pipeline that we've seen. You can start off with a chip-in or a small gift, a donation at an event or something if you really support our work. We do all of that. Rebecca's done a great job in doing pledge drives and street teams, and really thinking of creative ways to engage audiences. But I challenge all of us to think about additional asks, whether that's using the Girls Night In newsletter example, forward to a friend. We've even been so explicit as to ask for a forward to somebody's Christmas card list, or to share with a friend a PTA meeting. We really know that the word of mouth, and again, Texas is big, so the word of mouth is far more valuable than anything that we could say, right? Because when you recommend something, you're putting your name on the line, and you're leveraging your own brand and authenticity, and that makes a big difference.
I think also says a great deal about sort of the identity piece of what it means to be Texan, and what it also means to be an active participant in the democratic process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Damien.
Sí, nosotros tenemos distintas herramientas de participación, espacios de participación.
We have different ways and spaces to promote this participation.
Lo primero fue crear un centro cultural en la planta baja de la redacción.
First of all, we created a cultural space. It was at the beginning it was the cafeteria of the newsroom, but it became a cultural exchange space.
Y lo segundo es asumir que los suscriptores sienten que están haciendo historia al sostener un diario como el nuestro.
And secondly, also our subscribers came to believe that they were actually making history for supporting an independent media like us in Uruguay.
Entonces, siempre que podemos, los convocamos o a conocer la realidad o a festejar que las cosas funcionan. Todo el tiempo están sintiéndose parte y siendo parte de la historia.
So we organize events as much as we can in our newsroom to get them participate directly in person in different kind of participation events.
Por ejemplo, cada vez que cumplimos años, hacemos una fiesta en la calle con 2.000 personas que festejan que la diaria duró un año más sin fundirse.
So, for example, for our anniversary, and it's been 12 already, we celebrated in the street, and around 2,000 people show up.
Que no nos fundimos, eso lo dijiste.
Yeah, to celebrate that we are alive and well.
Pero lo más importante es, como decía al principio, asumir que somos dinamizadores de una comunidad de conocimiento.
But the most important thing, as I said at the beginning, is the premise that we are dynamizing an environment and a community that is already existing.
Y que hay suscriptores, que hay miembros de la comunidad que saben mucho más de un tema que lo que sabe la redacción.
And so that in our community, we find people that know a lot more about what we will be writing than ourselves.
Esto implica un cambio de paradigma para el periodismo que durante muchos años pensó que tenía que emitir en forma unidireccional y que se tenía la verdad revelada.
There is a change of paradigm for journalism, which has thought for years that we own the truth and we were due to tell it.
Concretamente, lo que hicimos fue convocar a grupos de expertos, suscriptores, que son expertos, a trabajar junto con la redacción en verticales especializados en distintos temas.
So what we made it is we call for experts among Uruguay to participate with us to generate this content.
Que además son suscriptores, ¿no? Son expertos.
And so they are experts and subscriptors too. They have these two roles.
Entonces se genera una dinámica mensual donde estos expertos vienen a la redacción a trabajar con los periodistas en mejorar la agenda periodística.
So we have monthly meetings with these experts to set the agenda and to decide what to cover, how to cover it.
Y eso se traduce en mejores contenidos especializados en las distintas áreas que hemos definido, que son educación, salud, feminismos, ecología.
So it translates to better content in the areas that we have decided to be experts in, that are education, health, feminism,
Ecología.
and ecology.
And for us, we do this very similarly, and we call it asset mapping. So there are assets that exist with the places that we work already, and these are things that they know about and they can tell us that exist. And the other consequence of this, so like speaking specifically about our documenters program, where we train and pay folks to mostly document public meetings, in addition to them doing that, these are folks that are from different neighborhoods and community groups and identity groups within the city of Chicago who then share that information in those same networks. So not only are you getting folks who come in and contribute their physical labor, but then they are also acting as a distribution network for you, and you can like sort of track that consequence. And that's sort of the phase that we're in right now, is like we recognize that this is happening. So now how do we manage that and identify like the outcome of that?
I think that question of impact measurement could be its own full day here. But one of the things that this group talks about a fair bit in our work is defining what participation paths and what type of activities are beneficial to the sites and its journalism, what actually is impactful, not just busy work, that also meets members' needs. So thinking about their needs to be recognized, to meet members who share their values, to grow their own media or other professional development skills. And we think that match is a really important one. I'm curious for this group to talk a little bit about how you identify super contributors. So the idea that this may be anywhere from 1 to 10% of your overall audience, and it's not always the people who write the biggest checks or who give the greatest amount, but I'm curious about experiences that you all have had that have been really beneficial, not just for the financial bottom line, but for the storytelling that you do.
Yeah, I think that point you just made, which we were discussing earlier, which is about the fact that actually the people, for us, it's sometimes the people who contribute the most vociferously are not necessarily the people who are bringing the maximum value. Not to say that they don't bring value, of course they do, but sometimes the people that aren't yet contributing hold the most value. So we're trying to find some ways to identify potential super contributors that kind of aren't there in that space yet. So we're developing a system called our Memberrolodex, where we ask members to tell us what their expertise are, their professional expertise, or what kind of expertise they have through experience, and we then verify those members, so they can kind of we can raise them up within the contributions and the discussions that our members are having. And when we do that, we're able to, if we're covering a story on a particular issue, we're able to invite them in and say, you have something of value that you can add here, not just for our correspondents, but for the membership base as a whole. And actually, sometimes just that ask, they're delighted to be asked, and it gives them the little push they might need to contribute where they might not do otherwise. So that's a way that we're trying to identify people who might not even consider themselves super contributors, but actually have a huge potential to be so.
And like we're still in our infancy in all of this, but the sort of like example that I think of when I think of a super user for us, framing it within the context of someone who's committed to the same crazy long game that we're committed to, which is like diversifying newsrooms, building trust, better local coverage in the city of Chicago. I think of Tanika Johnson, who was someone that she's from the South Side. She's from Inglewood, which is a neighborhood in Chicago that's very much demonized because of crime and what have you, all of the schools that have closed in Inglewood. But like, so Tanika, we brought in she's a photographer, and we brought in to do a public newsroom workshop because she does quality, accountable storytelling about where she's from, this neighborhood of Inglewood. And not only did she get a lot out of that experience, but then we were like, okay, why don't you become a fellow, engage with us, and become a fellow, our photojournalism fellow. And she got so much out of that and like language and describing how she does her work, that it has benefited her in other spaces. Like she's now presenting in local galleries around the city of Chicago, and she's still sharing what City Bureau does and where that came from. And now the next layer, so she is a co-conspirator for this residency group in Inglewood, and I am now conspiring with her to train Inglewood residents to become documenters, to talk about local school council issues and other things within the Inglewood community. And so she's a super user in that, like, she's identified ways in which she's learned from us, but then she's also like bringing folks into the fold to trust us in a way that like they wouldn't if I just showed up, right? And so that, for now, that's sort of an example of a super user for us. But again, like we're kind of in our infancy phase of figuring that out.
We are not in our infancy, and we're still figuring it out. I got news for you. It turns out everybody has a thought on politics. And so we have a lot of super users. We have a lot of people who are invested. We kind of lie at this intersection of media, nonprofit, and politics. So our people fall somewhere along the spectrum in one of those industries. Our challenge is to figure out how to put them to work, and we've done some of this. We've had them volunteer at our big signature event, the Texas Tribune Festival. We welcome them to have early access to our products, to find bugs in them. We ask their opinions. We invite them to join us online for digital conversations. But we are still figuring this part out, how to tap those people and those resources and that knowledge, and to use that to leverage the thing that we all have in common, which is an investment in what we're doing.
Yeah. I think that's the inquiry that you're bringing to that really speaks to what we heard from one of City Bureau's members, which was the idea of play to my strengths, that not every person who is involved as a member in your site wants to be there in the same way. Mm-hmm. And so really thinking, and I think this is the day correspondent model, what is the personal experience and professional expertise that you can bring to bear to our journalism that makes it stronger for everyone we serve? Damien?
Sí, nosotros todo el tiempo, una vez por mes, estamos realizando encuestas a nuestros suscriptores, dentro de las cuales se trata de identificar mediante la respuesta y mediante la información que se le pide el grado de expertise que tiene sobre determinados temas.
Once every month, we do a survey to identify what is the grade of knowledge and expertise of our members, and how can they contribute to our publication.
Estamos trabajando en un CRM 2.0, en una herramienta que permita manejar grandes cantidades de información sobre lo que nuestros suscriptores hacen y dicen en las redes sociales, sobre los contenidos que nosotros generamos.
We're working on a tool,
CRM, Customer Relationship Manager.
Yeah, CRM tool to manage big data about our users, what they do and say on social media about our content.
Creemos que la apuesta a desarrollar herramientas open source debe ser fundamental en esta estrategia de construcción de capacidades para que sobreviva el periodismo independiente.
We think to add in this kind of tools is crucial as a part of the strategy for independent journalism to survive.
Pero también tenemos que tener claro que no todo el mundo quiere participar. O sea, hay gente que solo quiere estar informado y sostener una mirada diferente y no le podemos pedir a todo el mundo participación porque no todo el mundo quiere participar.
We have to bear in mind that not everyone wants to participate in the same way, and so we also have to respect these other people that just want to be well informed and with this critical point of view that we can offer.
Solo el 10% de nuestra comunidad, compuesta por 12.000 personas, responde una encuesta y cerca del 5% participa activamente en actividades que se desarrollan en la redacción.
So about 10% of our community, that includes 12,000 people, are responding to this survey. This gives us a dimension of how engaged they are. And about 5% of this community is actively participating in our events.
Gracias.
Very high regular engagement. I think that's La Diaria Labs are especially well worth watching. Thank you for that. I want to make sure to leave enough time for questions because I know that there is a lot that this group will want to learn from these sites. It's well worth mentioning that none of the individuals you see here have membership director or membership manager as their job title. All of these are people who have different editorial and fundraising responsibilities that include and go well beyond membership. And so they are balancing a lot and are the perfect people to ask this last question that I have, which is, if you had one piece of advice, one nugget that you could offer people who are just starting to ask questions about what membership might look like with the sites that they work for, what would that be? I did not tell them that this was a question that was coming, so this is going to be direct from the source.
I can start. I would say that the best advice I can give is no does not mean no, it means not right now. I think it's so easy for fundraisers, membership people to get frustrated when the campaign isn't working. To me, what that says is that you haven't found the right message yet. So if you're talking to a group of, or an audience about veterans and perhaps they're not giving, I'd switch that message and I would talk about, the nonprofit model, or I'd talk about another topic, or I'd talk about the media in general. I'd switch it up. So if you find that your message is not having its intended outcome, don't be discouraged, try a new one.
I'd say not only am I not a membership manager, but we don't have anyone in the Correspondent with that particular job title. Engagement is everybody's responsibility, whether you're a developer, whether you're a graphic designer, whether you're a copy editor or a correspondent. And if you're building a new membership program, building that in from the start can be hugely valuable because then the responsibility is shared. We have roles where engagement is a much bigger part of their role than perhaps others, but there is certainly an element for everyone where that has to be front of mind in whatever the challenge is that you're tackling as part of your work.
Just to quickly underline that, as part of Des Correspondents' hiring process for reporters, if an applicant seems sort of dismissive of the idea of spending longer storytelling.
And maybe also interesting to know the way we work with freelancers based on that. So we don't just pay by word. Part of the way we structure payment to freelancers is based on they have to have an element of audience engagement with us, even though they're not full-time staff. So it's everyone who even comes into contact with the organization.
I think there's a lot, but for us, one of the things has been like, we don't make any assumptions. Like, we keep everything very open. So our membership is even in its infancy. And the first thing we did was we hosted a public newsroom where we invited some of our most engaged people to actually help us design what it looks like. Because even though we interact with a lot of them on a day-to-day basis or monthly basis, that doesn't necessarily mean we know them within the context of what they donate to or want to like invest in. And that's been something that we do in all of our programming, whether it's related to the journalism or it's related to the funding, is that we show an ability and willingness to learn and to constantly be learning. And I think folks really value that. And then they also know how to engage us as a result. Like, they understand that this is a learning space, mutually learning. And so it creates a different kind of community and community investment and camaraderie that's long game. It's not just like short term.
I almost now want to swap out all the places that I have membership for mutual learning. I think that's such a perfect description of what we're talking about. Damian.
Sí, nosotros buscamos un sentido de trascendencia en la pertenencia a la comunidad La Diaria.
What we look for is transcendence in our community, so to offer the opportunity of transcending the facts.
En contraposición a lo superficial, a lo frívolo, la gente que soporta un periodismo como el que hacemos busca de cierta forma cambiar el mundo con esa decisión de soportar un medio con una mirada diferente.
Furthermore than facts, the community we are targeting are looking for ways to change the world and to create impact.
Otro paradigma que el periodismo debe abandonar, creo que ya lo abandonó, es esa idea de vender objetividad. La gente en realidad lo que está queriendo comprar es subjetividad. Una mirada respetuosa de la realidad, pero que le ayude a entender un mundo que es cada vez más increíble, cada vez más injusto, ¿no?
This is another paradigm that we are in our way to disrupt. I think from La Diaria, I think that people are not looking for objectivity anymore. In contrast, they are looking for subjectivity and interpretative view of an incredibly complex world. So, and this is valid too. We're trying to make it more understandable.
Entonces, lo que le proponemos es tan simple y tan imposible como cambiar el mundo soportando La Diaria, ¿no?
So what we are proposing is as simple as and as impossible as just changing the world with La Diaria.
Soportando La Diaria.
That's kind of challenging of translating.
What questions do people have? I think that's such a great last note, but I'm curious to hear what you would like to know. And I think there should be microphones. There's a microphone right there. Simon.
I'm standing in front of the speaker, so I just want to move before there's feedback. I know City Bureau thinks about this, so I want to ask across the panel. How do you think about how, not just membership, but the community you're building, and how your news product works to improve the quality of life for your constituents?
Andrew, do you want to start, actually?
I mean, For us, the thing is, like, we have so much community involvement because sometimes a news story is not what people want. And I think that, like, when you actually have spaces for folks to tell you that, like, that's where you can start improving quality of life. And so a lot of what we started to talk about is disrupting information systems within the city of Chicago. And so, like, how and where information is generated and shared and used for accountability purposes, that takes it away from, like, this emphasis on story and producing an investigative piece to, like, what do people need to know and use, and it frees you up a little bit.
I would say at the Texas Tribune, it's as simple as the work that we provide. So it's difficult to find news on politics, policy, and government, period. And it's difficult to find news that is nonpartisan, that you can trust in this space. So just the content we provide. But in addition to that, we provide tip hotlines, so people can email us if they have a tip, and we get a lot. So whistleblower support, I would say. Our social communities are thriving. So we have a Facebook group in which our audience has direct correspondence with our reporters, and we get a lot of story ideas from that group as well. We're on Reddit, which is kind of a new place for us. We're kind of feeling that out, but it's a great place to send our information out into the world. But I would say one of the best things we do is just provide access to lawmakers. So you remove the flack, and all of a sudden you have 100% accountability. So people are asking directions of their lawmakers and decision makers real time, and it makes them very uncomfortable, as you can imagine.
The Correspondent works, everything we do is starts from our founding principles. And one of the founding principles we have is to make sure that our journalism provides constructive insights that people can use, that they can take into their real lives. This sits within what I think is called constructive journalism in Britain and the solutions journalism in the States, but it's the same kind of ideas. And to try and provide resources and tools that people can use beyond the journalism. So this might be like a pro forma for contacting your representative on a particular issue. We've done stuff around internet security to, a kind of tip sheet for how you can protect yourself with your wireless networks, but also stuff that is kind of cathartic and about taking agency back. So we did a really interesting project around the debt industry. And one of the things that we asked people to do as part of that was if they were people in debt and they had all of these horrendous debt letters, the debt mail that you get if you're someone who is really struggling with your personal finance, we asked members to make art out of their debt mail. And it was kind of this idea of like taking this really shitty thing that you get through your mailbox and turning it into something that is like means something for you. And okay, that might not necessarily help you get out of debt, but it's trying to find a way to like symbolize taking back control, symbolizing that journalism can help you not only understand the context that your life exists within, but that you might be able to take some action, however big or small, to retain that agency.
I can piggyback on that. After Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, we put together a here's how to give help and here's how to receive help post. And we continue to add on to that as resources were coming in. And I have to tell you that first responders were referring to that story in order to kind of traffic resources and support. So we've also dipped our toe into this, and I have to tell you, it's remarkable what some community reporting can do. It's not enough to post a story. You have to support the story pre, during, and post with community as well.
I think it's a great example of leveraging your brand visibility for good. Another thing that I think is really important from what Damien just shared is the sort of the myth of objectivity and how this relates also to Today Correspondent, the idea that reporters come from somewhere, that they have a point of view, and the expectation that they are human and they're forthcoming with what they bring to bear in researching a story, I think is fantastically important as well.
And also that they can change their mind. Like we don't have anything that stops our reporters saying, I used to think this, and as a result of the process I've been through on this reporting journey, or my learning curve as we call it, and I now think this. And I think that's super important in today's context, because the kind of vociferous kickback you get when you say, actually, I've changed my mind, it can be really difficult to take, and to encourage a culture where, okay, I learned something new and now I think differently is really, really important to try and encourage that.
Sí, yo una acotación nomás. Una cosa es darle subjetividad al lector, y otra cosa es decirle lo que tiene que pensar, ¿no? Donde los periodistas confundan la necesidad que tiene la gente de tener contexto, de tener subjetividad, con decirle a la gente lo que tiene que pensar, estamos fritos.
Just one clarification, I would like to distinguish between subjectivity, meaning just provide a particular point of view, and a second thing, separate thing, will be to tell your reader what he or she has to think. So we will be sticking with the first version of subjectivity to provide context and make it more understandable. And those who don't understand the difference are dead, but in a more funny way. He said it in a more funny way.
Other questions? Rebecca.
Hey, girl.
Thank you. When it comes to launching or refining your membership programs, there are a lot of rabbits that you can chase down rabbit holes. And I'm wondering, and this might speak to what you were the group therapy this morning, I'm wondering if you guys have any anecdotes about rabbits that you've chased that maybe didn't lead to growing your program or impacting the bottom line.
Yeah, we have loads and loads of rabbits that we've chased. The one I talked about this morning, which I think is, can be relevant, the most relevant, is events. We thought that the event space would be really beneficial for us, and I think it still can be in the future. It's not something we're never going to return to, but events take a whole lot of resource. We didn't have an events team. We had one person and everybody else pitching in, and it just really took away from the central goal of supporting members, providing members with what they need. They were too small scale, and they also weren't helping us reach anyone new. They were kind of preaching to the converted, which that relationship is super important. That's not to deny the importance of that relationship, but the kind of payoff wasn't, at the moment, with our level of resources, is not currently worth it for us. So we've sort of scaled right back on events. As I say, we may revisit, but for us, that rabbit is dead.
Solo un aporte más. Hay que asumir que la gente va y viene, ¿no? Y sobre todo si tenés muchos años, te das cuenta que alguien que en un momento pudo pagar, en otro no. Y si el vínculo es bueno, va a volver, ¿no?
We have to keep in mind that people come and go, and so along the years, the area has 12 years. Maybe you have them for a period of time, and then they can afford continue paying. But if you did well, they will be back when they can. So it's kind of flexible.
I think that idea of the long view is crucially important here. Also, I'm very sad, but we're completely out of time. If I can ask the panelists maybe to hang out just outside the room for a few minutes if you have questions for them, and thank you for your attention and for being here.
Yeah, totally. Swag.